Okay guys, welcome back to the car modeling tutorial. What we're going to be doing today is actually getting cracking with the modeling itself. Now what we've been up to in the last few episodes is firstly making our blueprints, putting all that information together, and then in the last episode what we did was we brought them into Maya, into our orthographic views here. So now what we have is all of our images set here nicely, ready to start putting our polygon primitives together and making our way through the actual modeling of this car itself. So, modeling a car or anything is fairly subjective. Depending on who's showing you what you're doing, depends on where they would start their model. Now, where I like to start my models is around the wheel arch here on the front. Now, the reason that I like to do that is because of, we can see here that this section is practically circular here. Now, the problem with this, if we was to start anywhere else, is we would have to make this circular shape. So what we would do here is we would start with a tube, and we would model around this area, and then essentially extrude out from there all the way along the different angles. So, in order to get started here, what we're going to do is we are going to use our polygon section here, making sure that we've got our modeling section selected at the top. And what we're going to be bringing in here is a basic tube. Now you can see that was brought that in just there for us. What we want to do with this tube is, actually what we'll do firstly is we will hide our image planes here, so we can just see our elements inside. So what we want to do here is we want to essentially position this tube on our front arch, and we want to edit the different subdivisions that we have along here in order to match the model that we've got before we actually start deleting any faces from there. So the first things first here is we're going to need to rotate this so that we can use the actual edge. And it doesn't matter if it's negative 90 degrees or if it's 90 degrees, either way we're going to have a nice face sitting there ready to go. Now in our side view here, what we can do is we can drag this element using our move tool here over into roughly the area that we want it to be. Now what we want to do here is we want to edit the shape. We want to make sure that our shape here has the correct subdivisions and everything before we actually start. So first things first, it looks like our thickness is fairly up here. If we can scale this up to match the size. What we want to do is bring our thickness in, edit our subdivisions here just to make sure that we've got a manageable amount of polys and we're not jumping straight in with more than we need. So if we take our thickness here down to 0.1, let's fix rid of these. Okay, so 0.1 is a little bit too much. Let's try 0.07. Okay, 0.07 is looking good here for me. It might be a little bit different to you, so what you're going to want to do is play with this thickness value here until you get it looking roughly the same size as your wheel arch. Now, generally what you would want to do is maybe make it slightly larger, because what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be making a high poly model. So because our model is going to be very high poly, what's going to happen when we eventually smooth this is these sections may get slightly smaller. So if yours is slightly thicker than the section there, that's perfectly fine, but only slightly thicker. And what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to have a look at some of the lines of our car here to see where we're actually going to be adding some of our topology, which is going to basically decide how much of this circle here that we're actually going to want to keep. So we can see here that we have a line for the actual front bumper here. We've got a line going straight down across from this side indicator here, which we're going to want to make sure that we have. But we also want to make sure that we've got that line indicator, which we can take down and use as part of our parking sensor here. Got a nice flat section there, so maybe we could have one division that runs straight down the middle, and then we'll have a division that runs up for each of these sections. So we're basically looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections, maybe running down here. So what we'll do is we'll keep what we've got just here. It's looking pretty good. We want it to roughly emulate the same amount on this side. We want to keep our topology nice and even as we go, and then we've got our sections at the top, a nice amount to go across the bonnet there. So that's looking good to me. So what we'll do here is we are going to now get rid of some of the sections that we don't actually need. So first things first, here if we right click on this model, hold down, and we can select the faces. And we're going to select all the backing faces here. We don't need any of those. And on the side of our model here, we don't need any of these lower faces here. We want to make sure that we have basically our faces here finishing when our model there finishes. So that's looking good. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to drag this roughly into position. So we're going to need to use our orthographic views here. As you can see on the front view, it's nowhere near lining up with the actual vehicle itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag that out and place it roughly where it should be. Now before we do anything else, we're going to hold Control and we're going to press D here. So we're going to duplicate this element and we're going to drag it away, and we are going to place this over the rear of the car as well. Now the reason we're going to do that just now is just so we have roughly the same location. We've also got roughly the same amount of polys which we can add to this later on to match our front section, as what we're actually going to be doing is we are going to be modeling the front area first. So we're going to be modeling the front section of this car here, then we're going to be modeling the back section of the car, and then we're going to meet in the middle and we're going to merge everything together. So the way that I like to model cars is essentially have a complete base mesh laid down the whole of the project here, and then adding all the details after and extracting the panels, all the different panels, as we can see, the door, the rear quarter here, going down onto the wings and the bumpers at the front. So first things first here is what we'll do is we'll get our wireframe shown so we can see our element section. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to start extruding. So what we need to do is, in our side view here, we need to firstly match up our edges to these sections here in the side view, and then we're going to match these sections up in our front view. So we're going to try and get that curvature of the arch, because as we can see at the front view here, the arch isn't completely bolt straight. So what we want to do is we want to kind of emulate the shape to this arch. As we go down, you can see that it actually comes down here in front of the tire. So on the side view here, what we're going to do is we will edit the position of some of these elements. So if we can right click on this and select our vertexes here. Now it's important when we're selecting these vertices should I say, is that we want to make sure that we're selecting all the ones that we want to move together. So we want to make sure that the ones that we're moving here, we're selecting both. We don't want to be editing this arch in any way, the main shape of the arch in any way. But what we want to do is we want to then match these sections, all of this areas here. Now what we wanted to do is we wanted to move these points up and down a little bit, so we can see that we have a point here where we're going to split off in two directions. So I want to make sure that we have a vertices sitting nicely inside that position. We're then going to have one vertices sat here in the middle, which is going to spread straight down there. This vertices is going to become the bottom of our signal here. This one looks good for halfway down the light, so if we can move that slightly up here, but again we want to follow the curvature of the wheel arch. What we're going to do is maybe if we have this one start here, this one can be a secondary division going down there, and then we can actually cut a section here for the bumper so that we're not disturbing the curvature too much. We can drag that down. This side of the wheel arch isn't too much of a problem because the detail on this side is fairly sparse until we get down to our side skirt here. So we're going to pull that into position there, and then this one we will drag and drop there for now, as all the details for that will be added in a future episode. So we've got roughly all the positions set up nicely for the side views. Now what we want to do is we want to do the same for the front views. So as we can see, our bumper here is curving underneath. So if we select our very bottom section here and we drag that to the section of the bumper there, we'll do the same with this vertices here. Because essentially what we're wanting to do here is, if you're unfamiliar with 3D modeling, is you're wanting to make sure that your points are looking exactly where they should be on all three models. If that individual point is exactly where it should be on all three angles here and all three of the different cameras, then you know in your perspective view that that's exactly where this section is supposed to be. So we can see that our primitive here is starting to curve along this axis for us. Now again, we want to match this in front and side views. Now, this is why we need an incredibly detailed blueprint, so we can actually see where our model starts and where certain sections of it end. So you can see here now we're starting to get fairly flat up the top. Maybe what we could do here is drag all of these elements at once, just pull them out slightly, and then we can get this one selected again to try and match that curve there. Okay, and then what we can see is on the other side that our side skirt we can't really see because the wheel is in the way. So this is where we can use firstly our professional judgment, but secondly our references images here in order to achieve what it is that we wanted to achieve. And to me it looks like these sections here just come in ever so slightly down here. Now again, when we come to this section we could edit it further. Okay, so we have the curvature of the arch there. We can see on the Lamborghini here that it's not too strong. In some cars it could be that this arch section is curved far steeper, but that's looking good just now. So what we're going to do here is we're now going to extrude down the side of the car itself. Before we do that, we're going to insert a new cut here so that we can take this whole section together. Now, in order to do that, we have two options. We can use our mesh tool here, and we can insert an edge loop. We can also use our polygon multi-cut tool here as well. What we're going to do is this time is we are going to use the insert edge loop tool. So we can see that cursor has now changed. This is going to allow us to drag on this section here, and it's going to allow us to place a brand new line inside our model. So in doing so, what's given now is a highlighted edge, which we can then move around without having to select anything. We can make sure that that's lining up nicely, and even if it is lining up nicely, we still want to get a little bit of curvature in here, because what will happen is when this is smooth, because it's got more subdivisions in this section, it may make this section slightly straighter. So we want to make sure that we get that bend still inside here. If I can right click, and now this will allow us to slightly drag this section back in a little bit. Okay, looking good. So what we're going to do here is we are going to drag this section out, and in order to do that we need to use the extrude tool. In order to extrude these, we want to do that on the edges. So we're going to select our edge, right click and select the edge, and we are going to select all the edges that we want to extrude right now. So what we're going to want to do is we're essentially going to want to extrude out so that we have a line at the edge of this signal here which runs down. We're going to want to have a line halfway through here just to give us some extra polygons to work with, and then we're going to have a line that runs all the way down this edge here. Now, the way that I like to do it is I like to take the extrusion in one go. So we can hit Control E, which is going to bring up this option, or we can simply hit the extrude button here, or we can head into the mesh tools for that as well. Now, what this has given us here is it's given us a rotation, so we can see that on this extrude here we can rotate should we want to. But it's also gave us our 2 points of movement here. If we go out to the world view, we'll actually have 3. Now the initial points that an extrude will give you is the object orientation essentially. So it's going to move, extrude these faces relative to the orientation of the edges that we're actually using. We can see that we've got this little dot here. If we was to click this, it will bring us the world orientation, which in this case we want the world orientation. Most of the time we'll be using the world, sometimes you'll be using the object orientation. So now with these edges selected here, what we're going to do is we're going to extrude all the way out. So we're going to pull this arrow here. So after hitting Control E, that means it's created a new section for us, and now we can position it. And the reason I'm taking it all the way out to this edge here is because we want to get our extrusion down this edge here, and then we can cut polygons into the middle section here. And the reason we're going to do that is because we only, my right button will work, we only need to position these first elements, and then when we add the the cuts in, it means that we'll only have to slightly move points rather than move them quite largely. If it was to extrude, move the points, extrude, move the points, and so on. So what we're going to do here is we're going to drag these roughly into position, and then we're going to finalize that after. So what we'll do is we'll zoom in nicely here, and we want this edge to follow this cut all the way down. So that means that we're going to bring this vertices here all the way to the point. We want this edge here to follow as well. Now we want this edge to be fairly close here, because when we add our sections in, we're going to make this line part of the signal there. So we're going to bring this bang into the corner. Again, this is exactly why you want nice high quality visuals. If you don't have high quality blueprints, it may not be able to differentiate between this edge and this edge inside. And we can bring this one down here. Now we want to make sure that this is sat nicely in the middle here, so we can get a nice even spread. So we'll pop that just there. And then finally this section here again is going to fall at the bottom of this line, but we want to make sure that this line is running perfectly down the crease here. So now we can see that we have our new faces coming down this section here. We can see that they have, we can see that we have our sections following the curvature of the wheel arch as well. Now what we want to do is we want to bring those sections into the front view, and we want to make sure that they're in the correct position here to make sure that in our perspective view we're going to have the actual shape of the car rather than just our extrusions here. So again, using both views here, we can see that we want this point now to sit all the way over here to get the correct angle for the car for us. So we can zoom right in here and make sure that we're exactly in the point. Now when you're in the side view here, if you're already positioned your element in the front view, it's always best to use the arrows, because as soon as you start clicking on the vertices here, we can see that on this side it's going to start moving for you. So make sure you click on the arrow so that you're not disturbing the Y or the Z axis that we've already positioned. Now we can select a second one here, we can bring that in. Again, we want to make sure that we're following the curvature of this line. Our third point here, bring this down all the way up to the edge there. And then finally this section here, bring this down here. So now looking in our perspective view, we can see that the actual shape of the car is starting to generate there, so it's looking quite good. As soon as we start to add more polygons to this edge here, we can maybe chunk it out just a little bit. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to essentially follow the whole curvature of this front end, and then we can extrude up. Yep. So that means what we'll do next is we will bring in this section down here. So we're going to do the exact same again. So we're going to right click into our edge view. We're going to click on the actual edge that we are looking to use. Hit Control E. Again, we're going to select the world option, and we're going to bring this right out here. Now we're going to ignore this section because we'll bridge that in just a second. We want to bring our vertices back in here. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to position those nicely along this edge here. So we can see this bottom section doesn't have an edge. So what we're going to want to do is, because we're going to want to follow this around again, we can just keep this nice and straight. That will allow us then to extrude this section around this edge here. To make sure these are nice and straight, we can use the scale tool here with both points selected. We can just scale in just to make sure that it's nice and straight there. Keep our mesh nice and tidy. So we can see that we brought this all the way out to this point here. We followed this along in this section there. Now again, we want to keep these nice and straight and relative to each other. So in the front view here, we'll bring both points at once. Drag them all the way out. And we can straighten them out. This time we don't want them to be completely straight. In order to keep our mesh as tidy as possible here, what we kind of want to do is emulate this edge all the way down. And we can see here that our front section is quite better highlighted here, so that allows us to bring that into position a little bit better. Maybe we can adjust this just so that we can see that there. Going back into the side view, we can check that, and we can see that the line that was actually following here isn't part of this section. So the high quality front section is showing us exactly where we may have gone wrong there. So we can see now that we've got that section sitting nicely just here. And then what we can do is we can now fill this gap. Now generally what you want is all your polys to be 4 edges. But what we're going to do here, just for now, we can clean this up later, is we're going to have it on a 3 edges. So we've extruded down. And now with our vertices selected, what we can do is we are going to merge these sections here. So if we hold V as a shortcut, we can see that the center of our move tools here changed from a square to a circle. That's going to allow us here to snap to a vertices. So holding C and pulling on this center here is going to allow us to snap to this vertices. What we can do is then mouse over and drag so that we select both the vertices that are in the same place. And we can use Edit Mesh and Merge. So that's going to mean that those 2 vertices have now become 1. So it means that if we click on here once and try to move the section, it's going to move both. Okay, and we're going to do the same here. And we're going to hold V, move that over, and we are going to merge those sections there. So now we can see that we've got that nice triangle section in there. and we can see that all of our points are sitting there just nicely. So we now have the curvature of the bumper there. So what we can do in this section here is we can now potentially add more of our divisions down this section, but what we're going to do first is we're going to run all the way down this edge and make sure we've got as much of the model put together as possible. So we're going to grab another edge here, and we are going to extrude again. And what we want to do essentially is do exactly the same as we just did here. We're going to extrude all the way out to this point here, and right click vertices should we need to adjust these any. So you can see, drag that all the way out there, maybe pull this one back slightly and up, and then oops, it's a case here of pulling this section all the way out until where it ends again. So in our front view here, we can see that maybe we should adjust up slightly. And what we kind of want here is we want to keep this angle again, because we're going to need to extrude upwards next time. So we want to have our edge facing at a slight angle here to allow that up section that we're going to create after. And again, we can just adjust these polys here to sit roughly where we want them to. Okay, that's looking good there. So again, we're going to get this edge selected. The mouse is going to work, and on this edge here, we're going to Control E again. Again, we're going to orientate this in relation to the world, and we are going to drag this up here. Okay, and then we can adjust these vertices here to fit roughly where they should. And then we can use the side view here in order to adjust these slightly forward backward should we need to. It's looking pretty good there. So we can see now that we've got the general shape of the bumper itself, but obviously because of the very few polygons that we've got working here, it's looking fairly flat just now. We can check our top view here, and we can see that the section that we've just been working on actually has quite a curve to it. Bring that out a little bit here. Actually has quite a curve to it. So what we're going to do here again is going to use the mesh tools. I'm going to insert some edge loops inside here. So I'm going to insert a few more subdivisions, and I think 3 would be a good shout. If we get one just here, one bang in the center, and we'll go one over there. So if we try take the center first, so that'll do most of the work for us. We can click and add the line in there, and then we can use the move tool here to pull it out. Again, let's go. And then again, insert our edge loop here, halfway in between the two. With our line selected there, we're going to be able to pull that out slightly as well. And then finally, halfway between the two again up here. We'll go again. Okay, so now we've got a slightly nicer edge going along there, so it's a nice curve to it. What we're also going to do here is we are going to add one subdivision going straight down this middle section as well. So we're going to insert an edge loop again. This time we're going to go straight down the middle here. That's going to allow us here, just to, as we zoom in, we can see that the line of this section runs slightly further out, so that's going to allow us to drag that out here, just to give it, again, a little bit of curvature, just to give it some shape to that front section there. Okay, so far so good. The next section here, we can see that we actually need to create a forward facing edge, which is going to align the top section of this bumper here. So we're going to use the exact same techniques as before. We're going to right click here, we're going to select that edge, and what we're going to do is we will bring in the edges of our sideways sections, and then we can do the bottom. So select all these edges here. We can Control E again, and this time we're going to move in. Okay, so we're going to use the x-axis here again on the world option. So we can see that this section is looking quite good. We're going to go into the side view with that section still selected, and we're going to pull out on this Z-axis here as well, just to roughly meet where this section should be before we start to adjust the actual points themselves. Now, because we're wanting to extrude down this section with the same lip, we're going to want to have a nice diagonal edge here. So our section here we're going to want to pull down to meet this corner there. This section here will pull down just to help it kind of make that curve as well. Following that line there, we can pull this one out. This one here looks pretty good. Maybe lower it slightly. And then we'll do the same here as the top edge. Then what we'll do is we'll make sure that's aligned nicely on the front as well. So by extruding out, it should be aligned fairly nicely. Bring that section in. Okay, looking good. And then we'll take this bit up here. Okay, so we can see on our front view now we've kind of got that edge there emulated. Make sure this section here is sitting nicely as well. Okay, looking good. And now what we'll do is we will extrude along this line here. And again, just like before, Control E, select the world section. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag all the way down to the next physical angle. And then we'll be adding cuts in between in order to achieve the curvature required. So that's looking good there. Make sure these are selected here. And then in our side view, it's going to allow us to pull these out and align them quite nicely. Okay. So that's our front section of the bumper there. And then we can go in our top view here just to make sure that it's looking good, so we can see maybe we need to be out a little bit more there. We can see where we need to add our curvature here. Now, when it comes to adding our curvature, I always feel that it's important to match the section that we're going to be mirroring. So essentially, the section that is mirrored here is going to be this line there. So we can see that we've got our 3 subdivisions with our 4th on the angle there. So we want to make sure that we get roughly the same amount in there as well. But again, it doesn't have to be done instantly. We can add that in at any point. Okay, it's looking good. And finally, what we're going to do here is we're going to extrude this edge. So we're going to highlight this edge again, Control E, along the world here. We're going to go all the way up to the middle of the grid here. And what we can do when we get to the center, when we get to the actual image placed inside here, we can hold X, and this is going to allow us to snap this to the grid, so we know that we're bang in the center there. We're going to do the same on the next point there as well. So we can see here, we're going to drag both these points together and just lower it slightly so that it matches there, the lines in the blueprint. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull these sections out so that it's going to align exactly to the side view as well. And we can see there, we've probably got a decent idea of how it should sit as well on the top, so we'll bring it back. Cool. And again, we can see where we need to add the curvature inside here. Okay, looking good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to match the extrusion down this edge here. So we will pick up the edge of all these sections here. We're going to Control E on the world again, and this time what we're going to do is we're just going to go up a little bit. Okay, and then we're just going to pull inside because we know that that's roughly the direction that we're going to be aiming for here. So using the size section, we can bring this section in. Maybe it's a little bit smaller there as we go around. And the only real change that we do for now, we'll have a look at the reference images for this section in a bit. What we want to do here is we want to drag the vertices of the section that we just selected there. We're going to hit V again because we want to snap this to another vertices, and then we're going to merge. We're going to edit mesh and merge. Okay, so now we have a rough outline for the bumper here, looking pretty good so far. The section that we're going to do inside here we'll do a little bit later because it's obviously quite a highly detailed section. What we're going to do just now is we're going to add a little bit of curvature to these sections here, and we're going to extrude up to the actual bumper line. Okay, so we can see here that we've got some details in here that we need to pay attention to as we extrude. We can see that we've got an edge down here, but we've also got the actual edge for the bonnet section there, which we have to factor in. We've also got this shape here, and then the potential for creating the cut for the badge as well. So we've got a few sections here to have a think about. Now, before we do any of the actual cutting in these sections to make our model a bit highly detailed, we're going to extrude these sections up. So we're going to click on the edge here. We're going to select the edges that we want to extrude. And what we're going to do first is we're going to do the front facing edges first, and then we can have our side edges matched afterwards. So we're going to hit Ctrl E again to extrude on these lines, and we're going to pull this section up. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull it up as far as the detail around the headlight here. So again, what we can do now is move into our side view here, and we can pull this extrusion roughly into position before we actually finalize it ourselves. Okay. So in our front view here, we are going to right click and select the vertices, and we're going to pull these points now to follow the crease. So this point here is going to follow this crease which runs up to the headlight, but we're also going to pull it down a little bit so that we can follow this line around here. And what's important to remember at this stage is we're just laying down a base mesh. So what we want here is we want to be able to facilitate the details that we're going to add at a later date. So we want to make sure that everything in this base mesh here is sitting quite nicely, ready to be adding details to it at a later date. So we pull those into position there. What we want to do here is we want to make sure that they're in position here as well. So we can drag them on this axis here just to make sure that they're sitting on the same creases for us. And it's going to be one of those cases that you're constantly going to be pulling points. So you're constantly going to be changing sections, you're constantly going to be moving bits around. So it's going to be constant edits on the fly as you go. So don't worry about that if you're going to be pulling points continuously. Again, it's going to depend on the actual quality of your blueprints. So we can see here that our edge here, already we have a subdivision in place which is going to match this section here. So we can select this edge. Again, being mindful of these cuts that we'll need to add in future. This section looks fairly flat. We're going to hit Ctrl E here, and again we're going to extrude that up to this section there. And now what we want to do with this line is we want to just follow the curvature of this. So we can see that this line here is halfway through this section there. So what we want to do is make sure that this line is halfway through all the way up until the crease in the bumper at the top there. So editing the vertices here, we know that this point is already in the correct position, so we're going to snap this one holding Ctrl V over there, mesh, edit mesh, and we are going to merge those sections. And we're going to do the same here. We know that our wheel arch here is in roughly the correct position. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down V, snap to that section there, and then edit mesh and merge again. And then with this point here, we're just going to make sure that it's sat nicely in the middle. So we're just going to pull it over a little bit. And we're going to try and maintain a little bit of curvature as well up here. So we're going to drag it a little bit higher. And it should be the only point that we need to edit in here. So again, we want it to be in the middle. So we're going to pull that out slightly here. Okay. So we know that if it's in the middle of our side section here, we need it to be in the middle there. So we're making sure that this point isn't too close to this edge and appearing to be in the middle there, because then that means that this section of the panel is going to be slightly off. Now we can see that we have our other section of our wheel arch here. What we're actually going to do is we're going to pull this down slightly on this side, and we're going to add a cut in here. So we're going to do the mesh tools again, insert edge loop, and we're going to add a cut to this section here. Again, being mindful of the curvature of the wheel arch. So that's going to allow us to edit this point here, and maybe drag it a bit closer there. Just trying to make sure that we maintain the curvature. Maybe pull that all the way up here actually. And then we can adjust this line here to match the section that we'll be cutting at a later date in order to extract the bumper even. So we can see here now that we have two lines to match. So that's going to give us one halfway down the headlight here, and then one roughly at the top of the headlight. So what we can do now is we're going to extrude these edges up. And what we'll do here, using the world option again, we're going to take it all the way up to the top. So we're going to take it to the end point. We know that we want a subdivision to be added inside here, but what we're going to do is going to take it all the way up, so again we can get it positioned nicely, and then it means we don't have to position more vertices than we need to. So again, we're going to make sure this is sitting bang in the middle, and when we get to sections like this, we can see where areas are needing adjusted slightly. So again, we're going to snap this to this section here, and then it's going to allow us to merge. We're going to bring this edge all the way to the center again, and then this edge here can run all the way to the point on the top there. Okay, now this is going to allow us here to add our subdivision in this section. So what we're going to do, instead of using the insert edge loop this time, what we can do is we'll look at a new tool here in the multi-cut tool, and this is going to allow us here to draw individual points along a line. So we can draw it on the vertices itself, or we could draw it in the center of the lines. If we hold Control, we can add a whole line in there. If we hold Shift, it'll snap it bang into the center for us there. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold Control, and we are going to bring this part roughly into the middle, and then we can click, and it's going to add a whole new line for us there. This is going to allow us now to pull these vertices slightly, just to make sure that we're maintaining the curvature of the section here, and then this is going to allow us to snap to our wheel arch, and then we can merge that too. So again, because we extruded all the way up to the next main point, and then it's allowing us to add sections in the middle here, there's not too many movements that we're going to need to make, so that's pretty good. So what we want to do as well is we want to make sure that our lines are as straight and true as possible. If we're not working with a curved section, we always want to make our lines as straight as possible, just to make sure that our mesh is going to be as absolutely as tidy as possible. So in doing that, what we need to do now is we need to add another subdivision inside here, because we can see that we've got a small extrusion within the headlight here. We want to maintain this section of the headlight with detail, so what we're actually going to do is we're going to make a little triangle here to go to the corner of this light, and this line will continue to follow up here, and then we can have this section move up here as well. So first things first is we will add in a new an edge loop here, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring that roughly into place, so we can see that that's going to run straight up there nicely for us. And don't think we need to actually edit the position of that, because that's going to sit nicely for us. Check our front and side views. That's looking good. We can just check in our top just to make sure that we don't need to have any curvature in that region. So we can see here that we kind of do. So we see that this line is actually running down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this down a little bit. So we're going to pull the whole line that we've added in, and then we're going to pull the odd vertices that we need to afterwards. Okay. So this is now going to allow us to extrude out to make a line down here. Now the easiest way to do that, the easiest side to do that on, looks to me like it will be this edge here, because it means that we only have to extrude once to this line. If we was to extrude this edge here, we'd need to go up 2 instead. So what we'll do is we'll highlight these edges here, Control E, hit the world, and then we're going to bring this out on this axis here, on the x-axis, and then that's going to allow us to go into our side view here and just pull it on the z-axis as well. So you can see that we want this to align nicely with the edge of the headlight, which is roughly about there. Cool. So what we're going to do now is we are going to merge some of these points. So on our extrusion here, we can hold down V, merge these 2 points together, and edit mesh and merge. Now what we can do with these points is we can pull them a little bit here just to make sure that they are roughly following the edge that we want, and again we can add the main details in after that. And again we can see here that these points are slightly out in terms of this top section, so we can move them in, and then like I said before, we can double check just to make sure that we haven't affected them too much in the front and side views. That's looking good. Bring that down here. So again, details like this we'll add in after at a later date. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to add another cut, and this cut is going to need to go down this edge here. Now we know that this edge is already sitting roughly where we need it to be, but we need this edge in order to follow down this headlight here. So before we do anything, we're just going to check that just to make sure that we're not affecting anything else. What we can actually do is spread out these curves again just a little bit here, just to make sure that we're not going to straighten that off too much. And then we can pull these points apart a little bit just to maintain some of that curvature as well. And we can see that's looking pretty good in position there. So looking now inside our perspective view, we can see that the shape of this car here is really starting to take some shape at the front. So what we're now going to do is we're going to extrude up on this section. So that's going to allow us to take all of this edge at once. So we're going to Control E, and we're going to extrude up just under the headlight there. And we're going to go just under the headlight on one side, but what we're actually going to do here is we're going to take this point all the way up here, and we're going to take this point all the way up here. Okay. I'm just going to check on our side views, just drag those into position just to make sure that they're roughly where we need them to be just now. Then we can fine tune those after. So what we're hoping to do here, because we have some detail on the headlight, is we actually want to use our multi-cut tool here. We're going to click on this vertices, and instead of clicking on any other vertices, holding control or anything like that, we're going to actually click on this line and we're going to pull it roughly into position that we want it to there. Hit enter to complete that. So we're going to move these methodically now. So first of all, we know that this vertex here is roughly in their correct place. So we're going to hold V and we're going to snap that to there, and we're going to merge. And then this point inside here we are going to pull down into the corner of the light there. So we know that we're going to follow that little detail that we have. Pull this point right up into the corner there. Okay, it's looking good. And what we can do is the best view to have a look at this to make sure it's sitting well is the top view here. So we can see we need to pull this up, and we need to pull this up as well. And then this section for the corner of light we need to pull forward. Cool. Let's take that back a little. Okay, so now we can see that we've got the outline of this light, this headlight, quite nicely. The only thing we need to do here now is we need to add a little bit more of a curvature to this line, and then we also need to add in the points here as well. So what we'll do first is we'll add the curvature to this line here. So we'll use our mesh tools. We're going to insert edge loop, and we're going to bring one in here and one down here. I'm going to use these vertex points here to make sure so we can see really faintly that there's a line here which is going to have detail around the headlights, which can pull down and match. And then finally, if we zoom in nicely, we can see that we've got this section here that we need to kind of curve as well. Okay, cool. And then we can check our other views just to make sure that they're sitting nicely. So we see that this section needs lowering, again, a very faint line there. And then we can bring these down as well a little bit just around the headlight. Cool. It's looking good. And then what we want to do is add some of the details here at the front for our bonnet section there. So what we're going to do again is mesh tools, insert edge loop, and we're going to put one on this point. we're going to put one on this point as well. And then what we'll do is we'll put one halfway in between, just for that extra bit of detail. And we will drag these into the correct section here in the front view. So we can see that we're following that line nicely. And what we're going to do is we're going to go just under that line, because we'll be cutting that line out in a few episodes' time. Here. Perfect. And then again, like I said, the top view is the best angle to make sure that all this is sitting nicely. So again, we're going to sit just under the line here. We're going to pull all these points down there. We're also going to pull all of these points forward as well. And we're going to get a nice element of curvature. We can straighten these two together a little bit. Okay, and now we can see that we can follow the curvature of this section as well. Awesome. Okay, so now we can see that our front section here is really taking shape. We can check it in the side view just to make sure that we're looking good. We can see that we're looking pretty good going across there. The mesh is looking quite nice around there. And what we're going to do just for now to finish off this episode, with our channel box selected, if we select this element here and we hit Ctrl D and Ctrl G, that's going to duplicate and then group the element. And then on the y-axis here we can add, on the x-axis here we can have, make that 1. On the x-axis here we can have -1. It's going to flip it to the other side for now, just so we can see the bumper itself taking shape there. Okay guys, so join me in the next episode. We'll be continue working on the bumper here, at the sections at the bottom, and then we're going to work our way up the bonnet, up the top of the car, and then we're going to be looking in the back area. Cool.